In this video, I'm going to be sharing the high testosterone diet that got me to 1500 nanograms per deciliter naturally. And I'm going to go over what really matters. You should know, before I start the diet section of the video, that this is only one variable out of many that will influence your results when you want to have higher testosterone naturally. So while you should fix your diet and implement the advice that I'm giving you here, understand that that's not the only variable that you have to take into account if you want to have higher testosterone naturally. There are other things like your sleep, your physical training, your mindset, even the type of light you have in your environment, the amount of stress that you have, what type of job you work, that all influence your health, your hormones. And if you're participating in certain activities like getting drunk every weekend, it doesn't matter how much you fix your diet, your testosterone is still going to be low. So, or it's going to inhibit your ability to have high testosterone and grow more muscle naturally and just get all the benefits that you want out of it. So keep that in mind. This is just the diet portion of the video. I'm not assuming that all our other variables are fixed and in good standing. This is what I would do to increase your testosterone through diet. It doesn't mean that if you're 50% body fat, if you just start doing this stuff, if you start doing this stuff and you have a horrible diet, you'll have higher testosterone, but you need a good body composition, you need to do cardio. This is just the diet portion of the idea. I hope that makes sense. So now let's get into the hierarchy of importance. Understand that all these things, and this is just very, very basic, all these things are important and you do need them all, but there are primary factors which the other ones are built off of. And the example I like to use, I actually pull from Ken Wilber, who talked about how, the physical world has a hierarchy. You have subatomic particles like neutrons and protons and electrons that make up atoms, which make up molecules, which can make up cells, which can make up tissues, which can make up organs, which make up bodies, right? And in that hierarchy, and the reason it's a hierarchy is because it all exists as a whole, and you need all of them in order for it to work, right? But the reason they merge the term hierarchy and the whole is because it's kind of like a pyramid where if you take out the base, the rest of it crumbles. And so if you take away protons and electrons and neutrons, the entire thing, you can't really have any of this stuff up the chain, right? Whereas if you just take out, something like organs, you still have everything that it's made of, right? If you bring something down to it just as an organ, you still have all the individual components of the organ and all the individual components of that thing therein. But you do need to have them all in order to have the body, right? And in the same way, when you're approaching a diet, you have to look at stuff like the quantity of the food. Oh, I didn't put timing in, but I'll give you a bit on that just off the top of my head. But you look at something like the amount of food you're eating, the quality of the food you're eating, and the profile of the food that you're eating. So macros and then micros, and then you can get to stuff like meal timing. And I put quantity as the base because if you don't have enough calories, you need calories to live, and the amount of calories you need supersedes everything else, right? Whether your goal is weight loss or weight gain or having better hormonal health or metabolic health, if you're not eating enough, within the constraints of the goal that you're eating in congruence with, you're not going to hit your goal if that's not one of your primary concerns, right? If you're trying to eat, if you're trying to gain weight, but you're not in a calorie surplus, it doesn't matter how good the foods you eat are for gaining weight. If you're not in a calorie deficit, it doesn't matter how good the foods you eat are for losing weight. You're still not going to lose weight. It's all enhanced. All the things after quantity enhance the goal you have, but you can't skip steps or skip the importance of quantity. So for someone going through puberty who wants to maximize their gains, or someone who wants to have higher testosterone naturally, and when if I'm getting into eating enough food being important. It's more because you just need a certain amount of energy in order to grow as a teenager, and part of the importance of eating enough calories is just getting in enough nutrients through those calories. That's normally the most important thing if you're looking at like quantity of calories being consumed. Unless you're starting to supplement. Like what I'm trying to say is that like I said, there's other nutrients that are important besides just the amount of calories that you eat that are important. And sometimes it's easier to get more of those nutrients in when you eat more calories. But we'll get into like micronutrient density here in a second. You need energy in order to live, and that's why I put it as first. And if your goal or your let's say your body needs to have 3,000 calories a day in order to be healthy, and you're not crashing your calories to the point, or like restricting your calories to the point that your body's like reserving energy for primary survival functions, which is kind of what like survival mode actually means. I mean, I'm not like we're not going to go down that rabbit hole because everybody thinks it means other things. But when you are greatly restricting calories, you're not going to have a lot of excess energy. And so all I'm saying here is that if you need 3,000 calories a day, but you eat 1,500 calories, it doesn't matter how healthy you are because you're depriving your body of energy, right? We can all agree on that. So eating 3,000 calories of peanut butter and jelly will be better than 1,500 calories of meat and potatoes. If your goal is like maintaining your weight and health by not losing weight and like greatly restricting the amount of energy that you get. So I'm not saying that you like meat and potatoes isn't better than peanut butter and jelly. I'm saying like for someone who has caloric needs, let's say you take a high school athlete, right? And they're growing rapidly, they're using a lot of energy, their body is just aching to make hormones. Like if you were not, like you need the micronutrients that come from meat and potatoes, and those are better foods, but like every day you're going to want to be eating 3,000 calories of peanut butter and jelly before you're eating 1,500 calories of meat and potatoes, because that's just not enough energy to like maintain, repair, and grow like a teenager would. And the same way, you got to make sure you're eating enough food. This isn't saying that I think you should get peanut butter and jelly. I'm saying that understand the importance of quantity of calories and everything. I hope that I explained that clearly enough and gave enough examples. So number 2 is going to be quality. And this isn't even getting into micronutrient quality, although it's kind of touched on here. It's the quality of food spectrum that everybody likes to over obsess on. The reason that I make this little graph here is that how do I explain this? Well, everybody likes to think about the quality of their food as being the most important thing when it comes to fixing their health and their hormones and their metabolism. It's a fixation because people like to look at one part instead of zooming out to look at the whole. People will look at fixing their diet when they can barely like run down the street without getting winded and they can't do 10 push-ups, right? And you'll get tons of these people who they want to fix their health and like increase their testosterone, and then you ask them about their lifestyle, like what's like what do you train, how do you train, what do you eat, what are your vices, and they're weekend drinkers. They kind of go to the gym. They go to bed at like they stay up until like 12 or 1 a.m. like multiple nights per week, and the majority of the time they eat kind of like garbage. But then they occasionally they'll have like healthy meals, and they think that's going to do it, or they just want to switch their diet around because even that's a bit easier than actually putting effort into training or going to bed, and not consuming alcohol or other substances, or leaving behind things that cause them stress in their life. And so I made a spectrum of, and so the reason I say that is because you have to look at the whole system, and it sometimes food quality becomes a hyperfixation crutch for people who don't want to take care of other variables, which just doing the basic system would probably outweigh the benefits in going to the extreme ends of the quality of food spectrum. Meaning that if you're just in the middle here, meaning that if you are a Montana hunter and gatherer, lumberjack, cowboy, like level of food quality, which is like in this model the best, you're probably, but if you're eating like that, but you can't walk up a flight of stairs without getting out of breath, you can't do 10 push-ups and 10 squats, and you spend all day inside, you go to bed at 1 a.m., you have a high-stress job, and you feel miserable all the time because you have a horrible relationship, like you're much better off like just taking care of those basic things and eating in the middle here, like frozen food, like frozen whole food from Costco, and you'll be much healthier because the magnitude of the importance of those other variables just being taken care of in their bare minimum is actually outweighs going to the extreme in the variable of food quantity. But on the spectrum or quality, and on the spectrum of quality, I put the worst case scenario as indoor obese incel video game addict, who doesn't see sunlight and like only gets up to use the bathroom throughout the day. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have the Montana hunter and gatherer, lumberjack cowboy. This guy lives off of Doritos and Oreos and Hot Pockets, and all he does is sit down all day. But like we're talking about food right now, so like everything he eats has been made in a factory, is flavored with ingredients made by scientists to get you addicted to them. That comes out of a piece of plastic, and was made to be in plastic. And everything this guy eats is like grown from his farm's ground or hunted from the wilderness that he lives next to, or taken from the animals that he raises on his farm. And these are the two spectrums of like on the day that they're picked, right? Like, so that's the spectrum of what is healthy and unhealthy in terms of quality, right? The stuff this guy eats, like, it was made 5 years ago and it'll be good for another 25 years. And this guy killed it this morning if he doesn't, or gathered it this morning, and if he doesn't, prepare it and, I don't even know how would you salt food? If he doesn't take the proper measures, that food will go bad within a day to a week. So I wrote out spectrums to this is the middle ground of like what's acceptable and what you'd be fine doing, because everybody likes to. I'm just trying to create a bit more clarity on on how to look at food. So here on the left you have Doritos and Oreos and all those other foods that I don't even know the name of, and then in the middle of the bad you have prepackaged pizzas and lasagnas and ice cream and other just slop that's made to look like food but isn't really food. And then on the better side of the bad spectrum you have prepackaged like meal prep that looks like good food but actually really isn't. And then right here we have just getting your own plants and animal products and prepping the food yourself. And as long as as long as you cross this line and your meals weren't pre-made and stuck into a freezer for you to heat up in a plastic container covered with preservatives that you don't know anything about, that's made to look healthy, you should be fine. You get frozen vegetables, and people, like, obviously the best is like being in this scenario, but if you get frozen vegetables, frozen meat, like generally, like, you're gonna be fine. That's kind of like at that point you're getting all the micronutrients you need. The food quality is like you're actually eating food. You're actually eating real food. Animals, animal products like dairy, plants. Obviously, something like dairy, you don't want it to be too old. So dairy and eggs, like, you're gonna get fresh. But when I say fresh, the freshest you're gonna be able to get it, and this is why I like to use this spectrum. You get frozen, fresh, and then killed, farmed. This past week. Was the bread made at the baker's shop like today or yesterday or sometime this week? Or was it, made in a factory and then shipped to this processing plant and put in this truck, and then it was frozen and it's been on the shelf, and it'll go bad in like a week or two. That's kind of like the spectrum of what is good. And if you're coming for like, if as long as you hit this line, you're gonna be just fine. But if you're getting into like the weeds of what the most healthy is, it's gonna be, killed and farmed this morning. You're going to the local farmers market, and you're going to the butcher shop. You're even going so far as to have your own garden or go hunting, right? And then in the middle is just gonna be like getting fresh meat and fresh fruits and veggies. And then again, for the organic fans, really, in terms of nutrient quality, you can get a lot. You'll be perfectly fine and healthy if you eat non-organic food. But if you do want to take the step up, things that aren't sprayed with pesticides are going to be better for you than things that aren't. And I would never say that's otherwise. But you can get like all the nutrients you need from non-organic food, and sometimes things that say they're organic actually aren't. And so the best way to get your own, organic food is really going to be by having your own land where you grow your own crops, or getting them from the wild. And that goes for hunting too. Just finding animals that were roaming around the wild. If you have chickens that just get to roam around in the yard all day and eat stuff on the ground, that's probably best. So now that you know that this is the best, and this is just where you want to be, we can go on to macronutrients. So macros, it's not that complicated. I have my own rules. And this is general guidelines that will probably work for most people. The way I did it when I was gaining a lot of tissue was I found something. I got my body composition to a certain level with a certain amount of food, and I was eating the same thing every day. And then I just added 10% and watched myself gain weight, and then sat there, and then I added another 10% or so, 5 to 10%. I just added a little bit of the same foods that I was eating, and watched my weight slowly go up, and my body composition stayed the same. And so in that way, you kind of have to figure out, you have to kind of titrate your proteins, fats, and carbs directly, but some general guidelines are that you need all of them, and you don't want to just eat one of them. People are really, really dogmatic and weird. Make sure you eat enough of each. You don't need to, and you really do need to add pure fat to anything. That's just another dieting tip. If you're eating steak and eggs, you don't need to put butter in your diet plan. You're going to get plenty of fat from that. Everybody overestimates how much fat they need, but everybody has to be dogmatic about everything. Nobody can just be reasonable and look at everything and think holistically. It's oh yeah, I just need protein, or oh, I just need red meat, or no, I just need butter, or no, I just need sugar, or no, I just need potatoes. There's many benefits to all of them, to everything you can eat. And so the whole point of me saying this is that you shouldn't just eat chicken all day, you shouldn't just eat rice all day, and you shouldn't just eat butter all day. Find what works for you as to progress as an individual. This is in the gym, and with your hormones, with your everything. But in general, have 1.5 grams per pound of body weight, per pound of body weight of lean mass for your protein, and a 10 to 20% of your calories from fat, and the rest from carbs. Generally, there's going to be a certain amount of fat you don't want to eat under, but that's also going to change with how much you weigh, right? Where if you only need 30 grams of fat to live every day, and that just goes up incrementally as you gain more weight, well, that's going to be way less of a percentage of your calories if you're a 200 plus pound man like me, and you're very, very active. Maybe my calories from fat are 10%, or sometimes even less, just because I get so many calories from carbs and drinking orange juice and eating leaner meats that I'm not really eating 20% of my calories. 20% of my calories at 5,000 calories a day is not from fat. So just make sure you're getting enough fat, and you're probably going to get enough fat if you have red meat and eggs and dairy in your diet, you don't need to add butter and olive oil to your food like all these people say you do. And then if you're eating plenty of protein, like protein every meal, just make sure you're eating enough carbs. And then we get into nutrient quality, which and I bring up, and for protein and carbs, like in a cut, you probably want to get those out of the way first, and then backfill with carbs. That's kind of why people feel like so poopy during cuts, is they don't have energy. Because if you're cutting carbs, like that's your main source of energy. So like you're not going to have energy, but you're going to have enough protein to sustain your tissue, and enough fat to maintain like some hormonal processes that you don't want to you don't want to deprive yourself of those. Just you're not going to be healthy. Carbs you can get away with cutting more drastically with less like physique detriment, I guess you would say. And then macros, steak. Okay, I use this example to kind of explain like the opportunity cost of eating micronutrient dense food versus food that isn't micronutrient dense. So let's say you have 200 grams of chicken. There's 240 calories, protein, and like minimal amounts of vitamin D and selenium, but it's not a very micronutrient dense food. And then you have something like 200 grams of 96.4 lean ground beef. It's 230 calories. There's protein, but there's B vitamins, 2, 3, 6, 12. There's iron, there's zinc, there's selenium, there's phosphorus, there's CoQ10, there's choline, there's glutathione. There's all these different little micronutrients that actually make it more worth you eating steak than chicken. And a lot of these are water-soluble vitamins, so it's best to have them multiple times a day. So they do need to be replenished. And then something like eggs versus peanut butter for your source of fat, because whether or not you know it, peanut butter is mostly fat. It's not a good source of protein. Doesn't even have all the amino acids you need in order to form a complete protein. And yeah, you could pair it with something else, but you could literally just eat steak or eggs and get that complete protein. And then when you eat 3 eggs, you get 210 calories, vitamin A, B vitamins, vitamin D, and all these other things, but especially like choline and cholesterol are pretty awesome foods. And then with peanut butter, you get some macros, but you don't get cholesterol or choline. You just get a bunch of saturated or unsaturated fat. And the reason this is also better for testosterone is that you need cholesterol in order to make testosterone, since cholesterol is synthesized into testosterone in the testes. Yeah, I don't think I need to go into the GnRH to anterior pituitary gland, like secreting LH, which tells the Leydig cells to do that whole process. But you just need to know that, if you have a choice between peanut butter and like a dollop of peanut butter and 3 eggs, like one's more filling, gives you more protein, much more macros, and it'll help you have higher testosterone, and others just kind of like a somewhat tasty treat. Same thing with chicken and steak. Like you're gonna have higher test if you eat steak versus chicken. You're also just gonna be healthier by way of you getting more macros in. Yams are gonna be better than rice. Obviously, you can see there's carbs. There's potassium, copper, vitamin B, vitamin C. I think that's supposed to be vitamin C. Beta carotene, manganese, etc., etc. And then rice is mainly just carbs. Like if you only eat carbs, you're going to have a lot of micronutrient deficiencies, and you're going to have way less micronutrient deficiencies if you only eat yams. But again, we're not going for the only anything diet. We're going for like, okay, how do we not have too many holes in our diet, kind of mentality. And so, if you have a certain allotment of calories every day, you're going to want to make sure that you're getting the most micronutrients you can. Now, this is within reason. Once you get, actually, it's kind of not, because if you get more like water-soluble micronutrients, you need to have them multiple times a day, right? That means that like once you piss them out, they're gone. So, especially with more water-soluble ones, you want to be having them multiple times a day if you can. And so I would say it's pretty much always a better idea to have the more micronutrient dense foods than it is to have ones that aren't. But this isn't to villainize foods that aren't micronutrient dense. This is to help you see that that for the sake of having better hormonal health, for having better for getting the most bang out of your buck, you're going to want to have the option that has more micronutrients, which isn't to vilify the ones that don't, because you can get them in just for calories. Like if you are, a marathon runner or a swimmer and you're packing away a lot of calories every day, like I did, I would have like 6 peanut butter and honey sandwiches on top of my meals of like meat and rice, because when I swam, I was eating so much food, and sometimes it's harder to eat more micronutrient dense food because it's hard to digest, or because it's just like not as palatable. And when you're eating lots and lots of calories, that becomes a matter of larger importance. But for most people, prioritizing more micronutrient dense foods is a better option, because you are more restricted in terms of the amount of calories that you eat. And while stuff like I put down here, like 96.4 is better than 80-20, and people are going to be like, well, there's like more fat, and fat's good for you. Okay, well, not being fat is actually probably what's best for you, and it's way easier to not be fat if you're not spending and I think of eating calories as like spending, because you have like a daily allotment. If you're not eating 300, 400 plus calories per day, if you're eating a lot of meat, just from eating fattier cuts of meat, right? Those 300-400 calories could be put towards, carbs or eggs, which is also a source of fat, but also have way more benefits, or fruit, or anything else really. It's just like excess calories that could be allotted towards better options in terms of how it fits into your eating program holistically. If I said, hey, you're gonna have like less fatty meat, less fatty, maybe a little bit less tasty, 96.4 ground beef, if you're eating 1 to 2 pounds of beef a day, and that's gonna be maybe 800 calories for like a pound, and then for 80-20, maybe you're getting 1,200, 1,300 calories for that same amount of protein. Okay, well, that's 500-ish calories that could be put towards anything else, or that you could just not have in there that would help you be in a deficit much more easily. And in the same breath of air, while drinking raw milk and having full-fat milk is great, and there are enzymes in raw milk that are probably worth consuming if you're not scared of having things that aren't pasteurized. Really, the consumption of that much fat just probably isn't a productive thing for you. It's not a good use of your calories most of the time. So something like having skim milk, which has less calories in it, but allows you to still get in the calcium that you need, is a better option. It's just less calories, so you can eat more of those more micronutrient dense foods. Remember, we're not trying to vilify anything. We're trying to think as holistically as possible, optimize as many variables as we can within the diet model. I have more. Oh yeah, key foods for you to eat are going to be red meat, so steak, ground beef, things and then eggs, because the cholesterol is very, very important. Dairy, calcium, especially lactoferrin. I've been doing some research on lactoferrin, but I'm not an expert, so I'm not going to comment. But dairy is very, very important. Salmon, have fatty fish probably 2 times a week. Oysters, very, very high in zinc. There's an oyster shack that I need to start visiting in my town. Potatoes and rice are great source of carbs, and then getting all these fruits and veggies in to get in your macros is always a good idea. So, and then I like to have pretty much the same size meals multiple times throughout the day, but if you have issues going to sleep at night, you might want to have a bigger breakfast, a medium-sized lunch, and just a lighter dinner. But again, it all depends on what your activity level is. If you're playing a sport at night, there's the thing that's ideal is whatever fits your goal based on the constraints that you have from life that you live. But in general, make sure you're eating regularly throughout the day. You're not skipping breakfast, you're not skipping lunch, and you're not, skipping dinner either. Keep eating. If you're into fasting, realize that you probably shouldn't eat for like two-ish hours before bed, and then you're not going to eat while you sleep, and probably for like an hour after you get up. So, that's about 11 hours if you're sleeping enough. 11 hours of not eating, is that enough time? That's already enough of a fast. There's really not that much of a point to skipping breakfast other than missing out on a window to eat and then punishing your digestive system by trying to shove all that food in later and throughout the day. So, just try and eat food throughout the day. Don't try and force feed all your food into one meal. You're not going to be as healthy or gain as well for most people most of the time. Anyway, if you have questions, comment them. If you want coaching, DM me on Instagram or click the link down below. And I will talk to you soon. But let me know if I really would like to hear your thoughts on this.